Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA oddsmaker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAOddsBreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by Five Dimes and hosted on MMAOddsBreaker.com. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts oddsmaker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC 181 event, which takes place in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Then, fight scientist Reed Kuhn will step in and offer his expansive numerical insight on all bouts with sufficient data. Today, Reed will be able to contribute on 5 total bouts. Also pay attention to our MMA OddsBreaker staff picks article, which will come out the day before the event or the event morning. So that will have all our official final predictions in case we make any last minute changes. Now, briefly looking back at our last event, our premium package bets for UFC Fight Night 57 went 2-2 to profit 0.92 units. We split our parlays, and our underdog bets also split, although we were victorious with our biggest underdog of Chico Camus against Brad Pickett. Our free play, which was a 1-unit bet on Jake Ellenberger, also failed to cash. Back to the present, UFC 181 features an 11-fight card in total and will be aired on UFC Fight Pass, Fox Sports 1, and pay-per-view this Saturday night. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking things off is a featherweight contest between Alex White, who is 10-1, and Clay Collard, who is 13-5 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened White minus 140, the comeback on Collard even money plus 100, and right now looking over the lines at 5dimes.eu, which is our official sponsor and what I'm going to be quoting as far as sportsbook lines go throughout the podcast. Right now White is minus 135, the comeback on Collard is plus 115, so line basically tightened up a little bit. They have been getting two-way action on this fight. I mean, I'm not that surprised. I mean, the opinion out there should be split. These guys are going to be in a competitive but fun fight, I think, in most cases. We'll start off with Collard first. I mean, of course, he was in a pretty exciting fight against Max Holloway. Collard, what you get out of him, now, of course, I should know real quick that he did take that fight on short notice against Holloway, so got to give him a little bit of leeway in that spot. I know he came out with a late loss in that fight, but overall, I think he performed relatively well, and he showed flashes of some good stuff for sure. I mean, of his overall skill set. I mean, Collard is one of these guys that is your typical grinder. I mean, he's got decent stand-up game. He's got decent hands. He has decent wrestling go along with it. He's got some sub ability as well. He trains at a good camp with Pitt Elevated. He does have some defensive flaws. I mean, on the feet, he does tend to get tagged a little bit. He has been caught by submission before as well, and he tends to fade as the fight goes on. I mean, his cardio, he has been 5 rounds before, but he does slow down as the fight goes on. No question about that. So those are areas that he needs to address. But at age 21, I'm expecting Collard to just keep on improving overall and be a player eventually at 145, no doubt about it. But he's facing a very tough opponent in Alex White. I mean, Alex White is another one of these guys. He's only 26 years old. He continues to improve his overall game. He's going to have some advantages in this fight. He's going to be just barely a little bit taller than Collard. He's actually going to be at a reach disadvantage, though. Collard's going to have actual 2 inches of pure reach over White, but I don't think that's going to come into any play here in this spot. But White is a southpaw on the feet. He does have some nasty knockout power in the feet. In my opinion, even though he does have a submission game, I think where Alex White excels the most is definitely standing up. But as shown in his last fight as well, over Martins, I mean, defensively, he's also flawed. So he gets clipped way too much, way more than you like to see. But he could definitely dish it out. So both these guys are coming in basically on a similar spot. I mean, both these guys are coming off of TKO losses late in their fights. And they both have shown some defensive flaws on the feet. So this is going to be a firefight. I think it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be back and forth. Collard, I think, is going to be the one pushing at a higher pace, and White's going to kind of look to keep this fight upright and try to do some damage on the feet as well. And I could see it going either way. But in my opinion, I think that Collard is going to be the more aggressive fighter. I think he's going to have, because of the pace that he pushes, he's going to have more chance to finish this fight, possibly if it happens, especially again, I don't expect an early finish if it does happen. I think we could see a late finish here as well. I think he's going to get his opportunities because he's going to be the one that again is kind of dictating the pace and control of the fight. But he has to definitely tighten up his defense because White hits with enormous amount of power. And again, that southpaw angle is going to be a little bit tricky and tough to deal with on the feet as well. But I think Collard's going to be game. I think White is going to be game, and we should see kind of a fight of the night candidate. I doubt it gets fight of the night because it is the first fight on the card. But that being said, I mean, it just should be a back and forth war overall. I just think the better skill set at this point probably belongs to Collard. I mean, defensively, concerned both ways, but I do lean slightly towards the underdog Collard, and it could be a dog or pass situation for sure because it's tough laying the juice on either one of these guys because it's such a pick-em type of toss-up fight that I do think there may be some value in Collard as a dog.
I understand why you're leaning Collard, but a couple things scare me here. Obviously, both these guys have one loss in the UFC, but at least White's been able to pick one up, and he scored a pretty impressive win over an aging veteran in his UFC debut. Both guys are young. White's 26, Collard's 21. And both have amateur boxing experience, although one thing scares me with Collard is he has too much amateur boxing experience. The guy was 65-20 as an amateur boxer, and he's only 21 years old, so 85 amateur boxing bouts already. So that's a lot of fights, a lot of damages, a lot of losses. So, he's definitely taken some shots. So his chin, could be suspect down the line, although it seems pretty solid overall now. He took a lot of shots in his UFC debut against Max Holloway, which was on 2 weeks' notice. Collard is the type of guy, high pace, high pressure, high volume striker with a decent left jab, and he just loves to brawl. If he can sucker White into a brawl, he could definitely win this fight. The problem here, of course, is that both fighters have just atrocious striking defense. I think Collard's is actually worse, although it might have looked worse because he was facing a very accurate, long striker in Max Holloway. But at least in that fight, man, he got tagged repeatedly, and he did get hurt a couple times, but he has that mentality of a brawler that he just keeps throwing even if he is hurt. And the chin definitely is pretty good. White, on the other hand, he's more of a technical boxer, but his defense is very bad too. I mean, he leaves his chin up, he eats shots, but his power is better than Collard's as well. He will mix things up, occasionally throw in flying knees, he will occasionally throw spinning attacks, so he's a little tougher to predict because Collard is more of a run and gun brawler. White's cardio is definitely a plus. In his last fight, he was actually, took quite a beating in the first round and came back real strong in the second, won that round before getting knocked out in the third. So, you have to give him a little bit of credit there that he did not slow down or fade like Collard did. And, another thing is, I heard that White switched to training full-time as a fighter after that last loss to Lucas Martins, so he is 100% committed to his MMA career. He wants to become a really talented featherweight, and that's only going to help. And this is his first fight as a full-time training fighter. I'm pretty sure he trains at the same small gym though, so who knows exactly how much of a benefit that will be. And also, Collard, it'll be very interesting to see how he performs after a full training camp rather than just taking a fight on super short notice. So both of these guys have a lot of question marks, both these guys have terrible striking defense, and both these guys love to stand and bang. I do think that Collard's fighting style is a little more judge-friendly, so if this goes to decision, Collard could walk away with it if he is able to throw enough strikes and keep that output going for 3 full rounds. But I actually think White has a little bit more power and a little bit more physically strong that he could be able to pull this out, and maybe he even drags this fight to the ground. That's something he's been working on a lot. So I'm going to lean with White, but I'm not confident because both of these guys are very tough to get a beat on at this point in their careers. But my pick is Alex White. Now, moving down to the bantamweight division, we have the younger brother of the lightweight champion, Sergio Pettis, who is 11-1, taking on Matt Hobar, who is 9-2. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
tricky fight. I opened Pettis minus 280, the comeback on Hobart, plus 200 out there. And right now it's minus 320 for Pettis, plus 260. And why I'm saying tricky fight, I mean, Pettis is a large favorite, for a pretty good reason. I mean, obviously he's got the popularity, the hype around him. He's got the skill set to go along with it. He's an extremely talented fighter, in all areas of the game, but it's a tricky fight because Hobart's style matches up pretty well with Pettis. I mean, Hobart's the type of guy that he looks for the takedowns. He looks to control you on the ground. He looks for that submission. And he's pretty dominant in most cases at what he does. He's very effective, and more times than not, when he wants to get the fight to the floor, he does that. So that's what he's going to be looking to do against Pettis. And as we've seen, I mean, Pettis overall, his takedown defense is solid. But he has been put on his back and he has been controlled a little bit, even in the UFC thus far. So I think that that's a route that Hobart could possibly pull off the upset if he does manage to stay alive and not get clipped by anything on the feet or not get caught with anything stupid as far as sub game goes from Pettis. I think he could grind out a possible decision. So you could be looking at a live dog, but it is tough as far as overall pick goes because again, Pettis, he's been drilling, the takedown defense big time. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the Pettis brothers in general, we're going to get into it a little bit later, obviously, with Anthony Pettis, but look at the improvements that he's made in his takedown defense along the way. And of course, these guys are training with guys like Ben Askren. So I think that, Sergio Pettis' takedown defense and his offensive wrestling overall will continue to improve. And he has definitely been drilling it for this fight as well. So it's not going to be easy for Hobart to get the fight to the floor, and it's not going to be easy for Hobart to control Pettis on the ground. So in that aspect, if it does stay standing, it's a no-brainer. Pettis is going to torch him. Pettis has the speed, he's got the power, he mixes things up well. I think he hasn't even found his groove yet, in the UFC. I think he's really the best of Sergio Pettis to come still. I think he's gonna, be able to perform well in most cases, depending on how he's matched up. Now, of course, he's a high favorite for a reason. Again, you got to factor everything that I just said into it and the popularity. His brother is a UFC lightweight champion. A lot of people are expecting Pettis to do some good things, of course, in the bantamweight division as well. And he has a skill set to do so. He can definitely make some noise. But in this fight, man, I wouldn't recommend, honestly, laying the juice on Pettis in this spot. I think it's a pass situation, possibly even a bet on the dog here because of how these guys match up. I know Hobart, a lot of people are probably going to be concerned about his knockout loss to Munoz. I know that he just got blown away early on in that fight. He got clipped quite a bit. So I think that definitely dropped his stock a little bit in the respect factor. But he bounced back over a very game Aaron Phillips and did what he had to do and did back to his game plan, got the takedowns and was able to control and dictate the pace of that fight. So I think Hobart's probably getting a little bit disrespected in this spot here. But as far as a pure pick goes, I think, again, more times than not, Pettis should be able to do enough to outpoint Hobart. He should be able to keep things upright long enough that he could possibly land that damaging blow and get the knockout victory as well. So my pure pick is going to be Sergio Pettis in this spot. But as far as betting value goes, I think it's a dog or pass situation. So if you guys are going to be throwing Pettis in parlays, I'd be cautious because I'm not sure if, this could be one of those parlay buster spots for sure.
On the feet, Sergio Pettis is significantly more dynamic and dangerous than Matt Hobart. Hobart is a pretty limited boxer on the feet. He's scrappy, but Pettis is much more technical, has a pretty decent power, mixes up his kicks, elbows, punches, knees well. So if this stays standing for the whole fight, Pettis is either going to win by knockout or win a decision. But why would Matt Hobart make this a stand-up fight for the whole time? You saw in that last fight against Yautsin Meza for Pettis, that Meza made this fight a grind, tried to drag it to the ground repeatedly, get it to the clinch, make it ugly, and it ended up being a pretty close competitive fight. And in my opinion, Matt Hobart is a much improved, upgraded version of Yautsin Meza. He's a much better wrestler, has a really good ground game, and very dynamic on the ground. He can mix in some ground and pound. He has some submission ability. So if Hobart's able to take this fight to the canvas, Sergio Pettis is going to be in trouble. He does not have the greatest takedown defense. He does have a pretty good submission game off of his back, and he can get back up to his feet relatively well, but that is still a liability there, in my opinion, especially because he's not a very big fighter for the bantamweight division. So in this fight, if Matt Hobart cannot get the fight to the ground, Pettis is going to win easily, but it's just not that easy. And if Hobart is able to get the fight to the ground, he has a good shot. So it all comes down to who's able to dictate their own game plan and dictate their will in this fight. And I'm going to lean with Pettis slightly because I do think that he is a brighter future, a little bit more of a better prospect. But you cannot count out Matt Hobart here. The guy does have a really solid wrestling game, and he could absolutely grind this fight to a halt and really slow down some of that hype behind Pettis like Alex Cazares did, although in a different way. So I'm going to pick Pettis, but I agree with Nick. It's a dog or pass situation. Now, kicking off the preliminary card on Fox Sports 1 is a women's bantamweight bout between Raquel Pennington, who is 4-5, taking on Ashley Evans Smith, who is 3-0. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Smith minus 180, the comeback on Pennington plus 140, and right now it is Smith minus 190, the comeback is plus 165 on Pennington. This is an interesting spot. I mean, I'm glad that Smith is getting her shot in the UFC. She definitely deserves it. If you look at her record across, her pro record is only 3-0, but across her career, she's had some losses in amateur competition as well, but she's fought in very top-notch competition, and she's the type of fighter that if you look beyond her resume and just look at how she fights and what she excels at the most, she's pretty impressive. I should mention that Smith is coming in as a late replacement fighter for Holly Holm. And her background, basically she's a powerful grappling-based fighter. Her stand-up is okay, but her weakness is in that stand-up area as well. She's a little slow, a little hittable on the feet, but she does close the distance pretty well, has solid takedown game, and of course, dominant in top control. Once she gets you on the floor, you can ask Fallon Fox that, first-handed there. She's got great ground and pound, positional control, and an outstanding sub-game to go along with it. So Smith is a very capable fighter, especially on the ground. She's just improving her overall skill set as we speak as well. She's going to get better at some of those areas that she's lacking. So she's going to be a hard chick to deal with at 135, no doubt about it. Pennington, on the other hand, has been one of these girls that has been severely underrated and throughout her career. She had a very close decision loss to Andrade. It's a little disappointing, of course, because she had that fight right there to win it, but Andrade did enough to get the nod there as well. So Pennington has kind of flown under the radar for a while. She's lost to nothing but good competition as well. She's got a decent overall game, but her weakness is getting put on her back, getting controlled a little bit. Possibly, her sub-defense overall is decent and it keeps on improving, but submissions, that's where she's going to lack in a little bit as well. Her pure jiu-jitsu. Evan Smith is going to have a big advantage, as far as ground game goes, no doubt about it. So Pennington's going to need to keep this fight upright. She's going to need to do some damage on the feet, which she can. Pennington's going to have the speed advantage for sure. She's got good boxing. She's fast. She has power, decent clinch work. And again, her grappling game overall is improving, but it's still her main weakness is getting taken down and controlled. And that's exactly what Smith is going to bring to the table here. So I know Smith is coming into this fight as a late replacement, short notice type of fighter. But I don't expect it to matter as much in this situation here. I think that Smith is going to be able to control the tempo of the fight and probably get the fight to the ground and get positional control. Could see a finish on the ground once it does. Pennington's super tough, hard to finish though. But if she doesn't get the finish, I think Smith is going to do enough to control the cards and probably win at least 2 out of 3 rounds, if not all 3 rounds against Pennington here. So I have a lot of respect for Pennington. I think she is extremely underrated, but I think stylistically Smith is just a bad matchup for her. So my official pick is going to be Smith.
Pennington is the type of fighter that perseveres when she's able to fight at kickboxing range, maybe in the pocket, and is able to land a lot of punches. Against Ashley Evans Smith, I really don't see that happening. In this bout, Pennington needs to keep her distance, needs to keep space, needs to have a high activity level, which has been a problem in the past, while Smith really just needs to close the distance, use that really big, athletic, powerful size, and grind it out. Smith is going to be very strong in the clinch. Evan Smith is going to be very solid in top position on the ground. And if she gets the fight there to either area, I really think Pennington's going to have a big, big problem. Pennington also, after that last fight to Andrade, she took some time away from the sport. She had, she wasn't even sure if she wanted to keep fighting. So that is a bit of a concern. I really do think that even though Evan Smith is taking this fight on short notice, she is going to be the better overall fighter. She's going to have more going for her in this fight due to the ground game. And if she was able to do some of the things that she did to Fallon Fox in that win against Pennington, she's going to have a really impressive UFC debut. It all just comes down to conditioning. Is that going to hold up? Will she be able to take a good punch from Pennington, and I think she will. So my pick is going to be Ashley Evans-Smith. Now this brings us to a light heavyweight contest between Ultimate Fighter Season 19 winner Corey Anderson, who is 5-0, taking on Justin Jones, who is 3-0. Now Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Anderson minus 385, the comeback on Jones plus 265, and right now it's minus 330 plus 270, so line just got a little bit tighter. I think there's a lot of people that are probably leaning towards Anderson in this spot, but are just kind of unsure of the situation with Jones. We'll get right into it. I mean, Jones is obviously taking this fight on, he's a replacement fighter on short notice, so that's kind of one strike against him as well. He's strong, athletic for a light heavyweight, but he has also fought at 185, so that brings up some question marks as well. And Anderson's going to have a huge size advantage over him. So that's going to bode well for Anderson in this type of matchup. But as far as Jones go, he's basically a striking-based fighter that has a little bit of skill all around. I mean, he can take the fight to the floor, but he doesn't have tremendous wrestling. And he does have a good sub-game. He's got a pretty nasty guillotine choke. I gotta give him credit for that. It's pretty impressive to watch it on film. But mainly, I mean, he's a young, still up-and-coming type of fighter. He's 27 years old. So he's still raw in developing his skills. But he does have some advantages over Anderson, meaning I think overall his toughness and I think his pure knockout power, is something to watch out for sure. But he is going to be, again, out of his weight class here. I think he belongs at 185, but I can understand him taking this fight on short notice, but he's going up against it here with Anderson. I mean, Anderson, of course, is the Ultimate Fighter 19 winner. He is a wrestling-based fighter with an improving overall skill set. He's basically your grinder. He's effective in his style. I mean, he does what he wants to do. He basically controls the tempo of the fight. His stand-up game is okay. But defensively, it is a concern. That's what I'm saying. You gotta be a little cautious because Jones, does have some impressive hands and he does have some power to go along with it. So even though he's gonna be the smaller fighter here, Anderson's strike defense is definitely a concern here. The other thing is, for this one here, Anderson, of course, has had a longer training camp. He should be ready to go, but he's had two opponents change on him. I mean, originally he was supposed to be fighting Vellante, and then it was, the newcomer Wilson he was supposed to be fighting, so now he's fighting Jones. So, change up mentally, I'm not sure how he's going to react, but I think from what I've seen so far from Anderson, it's been pretty impressive. I mean, the guy, he's very young as well. He's only 25 years old, so he's going to continue to improve his overall skill set. And I mean, what he does well at, he has some decent boxing on the feet, and again, he just, that typical grinding style. So he gets takedowns, he's able to control people on the ground, he's got good ground and pound to go along with it. And I think that's what's going to win him the fight here against Jones. I think Jones is just going to be a little bit out of his realm here. Anderson's going to be able to dictate and control the pace of this fight as well. And Anderson's probably going to grind out a decision win, maybe even get positional control and get a stoppage along the way. But I do think that Jones is going to be game. I see a lot of impressive qualities about him as well. But unfortunately for him, just this spot in this fight is going to be tough for him to win. So I'm going to lean Anderson as far as the overall pick goes, because stylistically he just should be the better fighter here.
The one thing that does scare me a little bit with Anderson is he doesn't have the best overall striking ability. He can get clipped, and that's pretty much the chance that Justin Jones has. He has a puncher's chance in this bout. Corey Anderson is going to be much bigger, much more physical, much better wrestler, much more dominant on the ground, and probably much more powerful in the clinch. Jones is going to have that ability to explode forward and land something heavy on the feet, and he could knock Anderson out. Who knows? It could happen, but that's pretty much the only way that he can win this fight, because when this fight gets, dragged to the ground or in the clinch, Anderson is going to dominate. You mentioned that Jones can fight at 185. He is a 185. There's no doubt about it. He's only fighting at 205 because this is his chance to make his UFC debut on short notice. So, he's going to be significantly smaller. He's given up 4 inches of height, about that much in reach. So, honestly, if Justin Jones does not land that knockout blow, probably in the first round, then Corey Anderson is going to just be all over him. So, I really think that Anderson is an easy pick here, and I completely understand why he's a pretty significant favorite. Honestly, at minus 330, he's probably parlay material. So, my pick is definitely Corey Anderson. Now dropping down to the middleweight division, we have the other winner of the Ultimate Fighter Season 19, Eddie Gordon, who is 8-1, taking on an Ultimate Fighter Season 17 semifinalist, Josh Salmon, who is 10-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA Oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Man, it's an interesting fight. Gordon minus 170, Salmon plus 130 was the opening number. And right now, again, it just kind of tightened up a little bit. It's minus 160 for Gordon. Salmon is plus 140. So a lot of split opinions on this fight, and I can understand it. Impressive win for Gordon on the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, he was a tough 19 winners. Brian just mentioned, he's well-rounded. For sure, and again, one of these cases that he's training with a good camp at Cerro-Longo, and he's going to continue to improve and get better in all aspects of the game. He's powerful, aggressive, very talented. On the feet, he likes to push forward, has good hands, a nice lead jab, throws them often really to set up takedowns and pushes, basically up against the cage and controls you that way as well. So he pushes a high pace is what I'm trying to spit out here. Now, his wrestling base is very solid overall. He's got good ground and pound and decent jiu-jitsu to go along with it, but I think he's just one of these guys that is improving overall, but he doesn't, to me at least, he doesn't seem to excel big time in any area. He just has, I think, more than anything else, is probably his knockout power on the feet is what impresses me the most. On the other hand, Salmon, I think, is a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit higher skill set in some areas. Of course, Salmon is the tough 17 veteran. He does also have a very well-rounded skill set. He mixes up his kickboxing well on the feet. That's what impresses me. He's got KO power to go along with it. He's got a good clinch game, solid takedown defense, so he doesn't typically get bullied by most fighters. And then, of course, when he gets on the ground, I mean, he's got pretty good top control in his own right, good ground and pound, and he's got a very aggressive sub-game to go along with it. So I do think that Salmon's a little bit technically better. He's a little bit, he's going to have the youth advantage coming into this fight. Which doesn't necessarily hurt, but both these guys in their MMA careers are relatively fresh too, so shouldn't have much impact either way. But I still think that Salmon probably is the more dangerous and more capable fighter of the two. I know Gordon's pure power might come into play here, in that aspect of it, but overall I think that Salmon can outpoint Gordon, even if it stays on the feet. I think that Salmon can eventually outpoint him regardless where the fight takes place, honestly. I think he's gonna be game. And the main concern for Salmon, in my opinion, is his cardio a little bit at times. Both these guys honestly tend to slow down, so I guess you could see it go either way a little bit. But mentally, I know he's had a lot of personal issues to deal with. I know Brian's going to get into that a little bit more in this spot here, but I think that it's Salmon's fight to basically win or lose. As long as he doesn't get clipped by anything serious from Gordon, I think that, I mean, if it hits the scorecards, we're going to see a very competitive decision overall. And I think the Salmon, again, on the feet, he mixes things up better. I think he could be a little bit more dangerous. And then on the ground, I'm more impressed with Salmon's kind of ground game overall than I am with Gordon. So it is a tough one. It's not an easy pick here, but I am going to go with the underdog. I think there might be some value in Salmon. Getting him around plus 140 or so on a pick'em type of fight. Not too bad, actually. So I'm going to go on a limb and pick the underdog here. I have been going back and forth a little bit as far as a pure pick goes, but I'm going to side with Salmon here in this spot.
Yeah, and I completely agree, actually. This is an underdog, and I really do think that Josh Salmon has a little bit more upside. Now, the one thing I am concerned about mostly is the fact that Salmon might be able to be controlled by a powerful wrestling grappler, which Gordon is. But if this fight stays standing, Gordon really is a little bit limited on the feet, although even if he did get that knockout in his last fight, that is not a sign of things to come. I really don't think this guy has a lot of power. He's not a dynamic striker. Salmon, on the other hand, he's pretty decent at range. He's very good in the clinch. Those knees are devastating. And on the ground, Salmon has just devastating ground and pound. Gordon, on the other hand, 31 years old. He is a pretty good athlete, but he just gets into really close fights and doesn't dominate the way he should dominate, even though he does train with an elite gym, a great team. So I'm really not quite convinced that Eddie Gordon deserves some of the hype that he was receiving. And Salmon, on the other hand, this guy is very talented, and I really think that he could go a long way. The one thing that does scare me is this long layoff. He had unfortunately, his girlfriend passed away last year in a car accident, and, he actually took some time away from the sport, and then when he started training again, he had a hamstring injury, a really bad one, and he's finally ready to roll. He's crazy motivated for this fight. It's actually taking place on his girlfriend's birthday, believe it or not. So, he's dedicating everything to her. He's super motivated. He's really going to be coming in there hot and heavy in this fight. So, I think that the motivation of Salmon and just his overall talent level could get him over the hump here. I know Eddie Gordon's the favorite, but I think that's more because of the Ultimate Fighter winning hype. And he really hasn't proven anything to me inside the octagon. That win over Diego Lima was against, a guy that's a welterweight without a great chin. And then the other two fights on the Ultimate Fighter were not impressive whatsoever. So I think Josh Salmon is the better overall fighter, and if he can avoid getting taken down for 3 straight rounds, Salmon could win this fight by knockout or win a decision. So I really do think that Salmon has what it takes to pull off this upset, so I'm in complete agreement. Now, headlining the preliminary card on Fox Sports 1 is a bantamweight contest between Uriah Faber, who is 31-7, and Francisco Rivera, who is 10-3 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Faber -405, the comeback on Rivera, +285, and right now looking over 5 dimes. The line is Faber -450, the comeback on Rivera, +360. So parlays coming in on Faber, maybe some early straight bets coming in that way as well. Not that surprised. I mean, if you look at it stylistically, what a nightmare matchup for Rivera. Of course, Rivera's coming off of a loss to Mizugaki, and Faber disposed of Mizugaki fairly easy. Now, you can't really use MMA math in normal situations, but in this case, I mean, outside of title fights, as we all know, Faber dominates his competition. And Faber's always one of the guys at the top of the 145 weight class when he was there. At 135, since he dropped down to bantamweight, he's looked phenomenal as well, always in title contention. So he's just right there, right underneath the title holders, in most cases. So, for me, to see Faber losing to Rivera is going to be a big shocker here. Now, Rivera, we got to respect his game, of course. We all know that he's a fairly well-rounded fighter. I mean, not on the skill set for sure that Faber is, but he's got a ton of power on the feet, and that's his game. I mean, Rivera wants to keep things standing. He wants to try to knock your head off. He's got enough power to do it. He's going to have a reach advantage over Faber as well, height and reach. So that's going to come into play a little bit, but Faber has faced taller competition with the reach disadvantage before and disposed of those guys as well. So Rivera on the ground is not going to fare too well against Faber. He's not going to out-wrestle Faber, so he's going to have to knock him out to win this fight. Now, on the other hand, Faber, of course, again, his stand-up is always game. He's fast. He could definitely knock you out. He's not really known for his explosive knockout power, but he does have it in him for sure. And Rivera is very hittable as well. But I think in most cases, Faber's such an intelligent fighter. He's going to go for the takedown right away, get the fight to the floor, and probably submit Rivera fairly easy. So that's what we're all thinking that happens. And I think it probably does play out that way. I mean, Faber is just on another level. It's kind of interesting to me, though, that Rivera is coming off a loss and they're feeding him to Faber, considering Faber isn't coming off a loss. So that's a little weird for me. And as far as a pure value bet goes, I don't think there is one in this spot. I mean, especially where the line is now. I think it's more of a pass situation. But as far as a pure pick goes, I mean, no doubt in my mind, like most of you guys out there probably agree on, Faber should win this fight and probably by submission.
Uriah Faber, this is the type of fight that he just goes out and takes care of business in. Even against, top 5 guys, he usually dominates them. So against somebody like Francisco Rivera, who is, near the bottom of the top 15 of the UFC bantamweight division, this should be a really easy performance for him. All Faber really has to do is get in there, get this fight to the ground, and he's either going to finish it with a TKO on the ground or he's going to finish it with a submission on the ground. Francisco Rivera is just not equipped to deal with the multifaceted game of Uriah Faber. Now, Rivera does have power. He has a puncher's chance if this fight stays standing because he does have, the ability to end the fight in one strike. But overall, there's just so unlikely that he's going to be able to clip Faber and then he would have to completely knock him out with one punch because Faber has those instincts to just grab a leg if he does get hurt. And I don't think Rivera would be able to survive that even. So, I just think this is going to be a really tough situation for Francisco Rivera. And even though Uriah Faber is getting up there in years, he's gone out there and taken care of business against guys significantly younger than him before, like Michael McDonald. And I don't think he'll have too much of a problem here against Francisco Rivera, a guy that just is not in that same level. So I definitely have to side with Uriah Faber here. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, it's funny. If I actually look at their historical benchmarks, it almost seems like Rivera actually has a lot of advantages. But that, I don't think that's the case because the strength of schedule difference between these two guys is astronomical. Faber has been in so many title fights. His only losses have ever come in title fights. And so if you think some of the metrics might be borderline or average, think again because the quality of opponents that he was going in against, for long fights, Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo, that takes its toll when you're fighting top quality guys. So, this is a situation where I have to discount any differences that I see, because I just think Faber is so much more experienced, intelligent in the cage, well-rounded, skilled. He's got the wrestling to rely on, but he is also, as you mentioned with that Michael McDonald fight, very dangerous with his hands and his submissions. So this is more of a question of when, not if, does Faber win. He probably gets a finish at some point, but obviously, you can't lay too much juice. It eliminates some of the value in even betting him, but I do expect him to probably get bet up as part of parlays. He's clearly the favorite here.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now, moving on to the pay-per-view main card, we have a lightweight contest between Tony Ferguson, who is 17-3, taking on Abel Trujillo, who is 12-5 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Ferguson minus 245, the comeback on Trujillo, plus 175, and right now over at Dimes, it's minus 250 for Ferguson, the comeback on Trujillo, plus 210, so line basically tightened up a little bit. Some two-way action coming in on this fight for sure, and it's staying steady. Now, it is a difficult fight to bet because both these guys have very talented skill sets overall. I mean, Trujillo's just a beast. If you look at some of his last few fights, he's performed relatively well. I mean, his comeback, I want to say comeback win over Varner. I mean, it was kind of a firefight, of course, but he was in some trouble in that fight. But he's got enough power and explosiveness that he can do that sort of thing. I mean, he's aggressive. He's scary on the feet, really, because of his power. Now, as far as well-rounded skill set, I mean, he's got some decent underrated wrestling probably in most cases. He can be taken down, he can be controlled, and his sub-defense is getting better, but it's still, I think, a little bit of a weakness for him. So, Trujillo, a very talented guy, more of a grinder, more of a brawler, more of a wild man, and that's what he's gonna look to do in this fight against Ferguson. Now, on the other hand, Ferguson, of course, I think he's a lot more technical. He's gonna have a reach advantage here. He's gonna have 6 inches of pure reach, over Trujillo on the feet. So that could come into play. He knows how to use his reach fairly well. And of course, we were talking about Trujillo's knockout power. I mean, Ferguson has a lot of knockout power to go along with it as well. So Ferguson is dangerous on the feet. I think he mixes things up better. Again, a little bit more technical. Now, what sticks out to me the most is Ferguson's submission ability. I know in his last fight against Castillo, a lot of people were disappointed, that he was on his back, spent a little bit more, time on his back than most of us thought he would, honestly. But Castillo's a different type of beast. I mean, Castillo, I think his fight IQ is a little bit better than Trujillo overall. His game plan was to look for the takedowns, take the fight to the floor. Trujillo's not going to be like that. I think if anything, in this matchup here, Ferguson's going to be the one that possibly looks to take Trujillo down or take his back and look for a submission here. And I think that's a realistic way for Ferguson to get this, to win. If not, if it does stay standing on the feet, I think Ferguson can outpoint Trujillo, if not do enough damage on the feet where he does land that knockout punch as well. Because both these guys are hittable. I've seen flaws in both their defense for sure standing. They do get tagged more than you'd like to see. But I think that Trujillo, having that reach disadvantage, he's going to probably eat more punches. And along the way, Ferguson is nasty enough that he's going to probably get the job done. So I don't really expect this fight to hit the cards. I mean, both these guys have that much finishing abilities. But overall, I think skill set for skill set, you got to lean with Ferguson. I think he's the better, more technical fighter. He's got the submission game. He's got probably the wrestling advantage overall in this fight too. And again, on the feet, he's going to have that reach advantage. So any way I see this fight take place, the only way I really do believe Trujillo wins this fight is honestly by knockout. Now it could happen, but I would be a little bit more surprised. I would be less surprised if I see Ferguson stopping and finishing Trujillo. So that's my stance on it. I think there could be some value at Ferguson minus 245, minus 250, where the line is now, especially for parlay material. I think there's value obviously straight as well, but people might want to try to throw him in a parlay out there as well. But my pick officially is going to be Ferguson.
I'm going to actually come in slightly on the other side here. Honestly, the thing that scares me the most about Tony Ferguson is the submission game, and it's a negative thing. Obviously, Ferguson had a nice return to the UFC after that long layoff, and he scored that Darce choke submission victory, and he looked terrific. But it just seems like, especially in all 3 of his most recent fights, he's been hunting for submissions, low success submissions, and it scares the hell out of me. You saw it in his, fight against Kikuno where, he was clearly getting the better of this guy on the feet and he started going for arm bars and stuff. And then in his last fight, he just kept going for heel hooks and arm bars against Danny Castillo. And I'm a little worried that he's kind of fallen in love with that part of his game. I mean, obviously on the feet, this guy's dangerous. And he definitely has that knockout ability. And he's got an incredible reach for a lightweight, probably the best in the entire UFC roster. But he just does not have a good fight IQ. Like, I'm not sure. Like, there's just something about him that I can't trust yet. I need to see a couple more fights out of him. And the fact that he's so willing to pull guard and go for these submissions and give up top position, it's so bad for judging. And it makes it very difficult for him to win decisions. Honestly, he should have lost that last fight to Danny Castillo. And Abel Trujillo, he is a much more focused fighter. I mean, yeah, he's a crazy brawler that's willing to take a shot to give one and wings punches from his hips. But, you know, that's something that you can trust in. Abel Trujillo is a guy that's going to be coming forward, and he is going to be throwing knees and punches and elbows and haymakers, you know, what the kitchen sink at Tony Ferguson. And if Ferguson decides to turn this into a brawl, I think he could lose it. If he makes it a more technical fight and keeps it standing and uses that fight IQ properly, Ferguson can win this fight. You know, he does have the reach advantage. He does have a decent jab. He has, you know, good straight punches. But when was the last time you really saw Tony Ferguson do that? It's been a long, long time. And, you know, Abel Trujillo is the type of guy that is just a never give up warrior. I mean, even in that fight against Jamie Varner, you know, he was hurt, he was in trouble, and he just kept throwing, and he eventually just clipped Varner and put him out with one big shot. And I could see it happening against Ferguson, and if it doesn't happen and he doesn't get the knockout, he could still potentially win a decision because he can throw those type of strikes at a high pace and keep it up. I mean, his conditioning won't last the whole 3 rounds, you know, perfectly, but he can still go. And that does scare me with the fight IQ of Tony Ferguson. So I'm going to side with Trujillo. I'm going to pick the upset. But, you know, if Ferguson fights smart, he definitely could win this fight. I just can't trust him to fight smart. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, if I'm a tiebreaker, I'm going to lean with the favorite here. The size is a big issue. Trujillo looked great in a few fairly violent fights that he had, but he was fighting much shorter range guys, so he was able to get close. He also, you mentioned the brawling style. We absolutely see that on paper. 3/4 of all his head strikes are power strikes. That means he relies very little on using his jab. And a good effective jab is more of a finesse player's game. The optimal mix really is more like a 1-to-1 ratio. You know, a jab for every power strike is a good balanced fighter. And Ferguson is more of a balanced guy. So Ferguson has shown some power. He's broken some jaws. He's knocked people down. And he operates at a slightly higher pace, and throw in extra 6 inches of range. That's going to help him in the stand up. He also has 87% takedown defense on the main card. That's actually the best of anyone there, including, you've got, 4 people fighting in title fights. That's pretty impressive. So I don't think he's going to get taken down. I think he's going to keep his distance. And I think one word that was thrown around is technical. I think Ferguson is just more technical, and as an MMA fighter. And I think that should save him here. I think he's definitely justified as a favorite. I see the risk, the knockout risk that a power slugger like Trujillo brings into the cage, but I do think Ferguson will end up with his hand raised one way or the other.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now this takes us to a heavyweight bout on the main card between Todd Duffy, making his return with an 8-2 record, against Anthony Hamilton, who is 13-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Duffy minus 280, the comeback on Hamilton plus 200, and again, looking over at dimes right now, it's Duffy minus 325, the comeback on Hamilton plus 265. So there is some support coming in on Duffy early on, and I'm not really that surprised. I mean, he definitely is the more popular fighter, the more, I guess, respected fighter in some ways. I know that's, for the diehard MMA fans out there, that's kind of far-fetched a little bit because, man, Duffy does definitely have some flaws as well. But offensively, I mean, Duffy's a beast. I mean, look at his physique physically. He's athletic, he's strong. Offensively, as far as stand-up goes, I mean, he can mix things up well with power. I mean, he's aggressive. He could definitely knock most out in the heavyweight division for sure. But there's some question marks around his overall game. I mean, of course, he's got a little bit of wrestling to go along with it. Duffy's okay in that aspect of it too in most cases. But still, I think his chin is very suspect. Doesn't take much for him to get KO'd. I mean, if you look at his Mike Russo fight, I know a lot of people are going to probably reflect back on that, but I mean, he was dominating Russo that whole time and then just one punch mainly got him out of there. So that's kind of scary. And then of course he followed that up with just getting dismantled by Alistair Overeem. Now, since that time, he does have a couple wins. Of course, one being in the UFC over DeFries recently and the other one over Neil Grove. So he bounced back impressively. But at the same time, there's all those concerns still. I mean, Duffy was a highly touted prospect when he made his UFC debut, and he just hasn't really lived up to that hype. Now, again, of course, he's training with AKA. He's in a good environment. I'm expecting some good things from him, and he's got some potential to probably still climb up that UFC ladder if matched correctly. And that's kind of what the UFC is doing here with Hamilton. I think Hamilton overall is a very strong fighter in his own right. I mean, physically strong, but he's not going to match up quite that well with Duffy in that aspect of it. Hamilton's more of a grinder, more of a brawler on the feet. He's a little bit slower. He's very hittable, and he's got a suspect chin as well. So it doesn't take much, I think, to kind of rock and get rid of Hamilton either. So Duffy should have the advantage here because he should be able to maintain the fight upright. Hamilton shouldn't have that much success taking the fight to the floor. And if Duffy can maintain it upright, he's faster. He's a little bit more dangerous on the feet. He's got that knockout power edge. So I think that's probably what's going to happen. We're going to see Duffy test that chin of Hamilton, and he's going to tag him first, and Hamilton is going to probably be out. So it just, it's unfortunate because I know Hamilton's improved his overall game, but I just don't think he's quite on the level of Duffy. Now, that being said, again, I mean, I'm not sure where Duffy is. He's going to have to really put together a few wins here for me to kind of get all that respect back, and kind of make a run towards the heavyweight title here and look a little bit more stable, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So a lot of question marks behind both of these guys. It is a heavyweight fight, so it can end any moment for sure. But I do lean towards Duffy. I think he's probably going to be the one that does the damage first and win this fight.
Honestly, Todd Duffy is just such a much better athlete than Anthony Hamilton. He's much quicker, more explosive. He has more power on the feet. Neither guy has a very good chin, but Duffy is going to be the guy that hits first and hits hardest if they both land that same shot at the same time. The one thing that scares me, and there's one thing, and it's Anthony Hamilton when he was in the MFC took on a similarly, super hyped striker in Smilino Rama, and he was able to survive early and then knocked him out, I believe, in the second round with the head kick. Now, that is the type of fight, and Hamilton even has a similar type of a body to a guy that Todd Duffy fought in Mike Russo, that he just laid into him for the whole fight, couldn't put him away, and then just one big punch and he went down. So that type of situation, maybe. But I don't think that Hamilton has the chin of Mike Russo. He can't absorb that same amount of punishment. And I think at some point Todd Duffy's going to be putting Anthony Hamilton down. If Hamilton is able to use his wrestling, get on top, we could see a similar like his last fight where, he just kept dropping punches to the body and head until the fight stopped. But I just think Todd Duffy's a much better athlete than Anthony Hamilton's last opponent. And at some point, Todd Duffy's just going to connect with something really solid and Hamilton will probably go down. So my pick is Todd Duffy, although his chin does scare me, but I am picking him and he should probably win convincingly here.
Ivan Brown minus 270 to come back on Schaub, plus 190. And right now, looking over at the line, it's minus 330. The comeback is plus 270. So a little bit more action coming in on Brown. And I understand it. I really agree with that movement as well. I know Schaub has really improved his overall skill set, meaning that, he was more well known for his knockout power, for his stand-up ability in most cases. He's been diligently working to improve his ground game, and it showed really. He's definitely, he has some submission skill to go along with some solid wrestling overall now. His fight IQ is increasing, and he needs to do all that stuff because, man, is that chin suspect. That's what's holding Schaub back, I think, obviously, is his ability to get hit and just get put out. He's got 3 knockout losses on his resume. But that being said, his last fight against Arlovsky, his chin held up pretty well. He fought relatively smart. A lot of people were saying that it was a controversial decision. It should have went his way. You can't argue that. I agree with that as well. But he did look pretty good against Mitrione and Johnson as well. So Schaub is making some improvements in his overall game. It's good to see him, I guess, look for takedowns and work the other aspects of his game because his chin is that bad. But at the same time, Brown is going to be one of these guys that's very hard to take down, very hard to control, and very hard to deal with. I mean, as far as pure reach goes, he's only going to have a 2-inch pure reach advantage over Schaub, but still, I mean, that's something that Schaub is usually, I guess, used to being a little bit longer, a little bit taller than his opponent, so that's going to come into play a little bit. The takedown defense is what's going to come into play the most, I think, for Brown. He's around 85% or so, and if you look at it, I mean, he is a very hard guy to take down and control. Nobody's had really a tremendous amount of success against Brown in that department. And if Brown keeps things upright, I think that he is the better striker overall. Schaub, again, does have some knockout power in the feet, but I think Brown mixes things up better. He's more dangerous. He's got the kicking aspect of the game down pretty well. He's got good power in his hands to go along with it. He's actually in his last fight, I know that he lost to Verdum, and it was a big surprise to most of us, including myself. I mean, how Verdum performed in that fight. We were all pretty much expecting Brown to come through in that spot. But that being said, I could take away some good from that fight. I know Brown was kind of a letdown, but he did go the distance. I mean, that fight was a hard fight to go. I mean, 5 rounds. He took a beating. I mean, Verdum landed some shots on him. Brown showed a lot of toughness. I mean, he could have easily quit along the way, and he didn't. So I do take something from it. I think that's a positive. I mean, Brown's been battle tested now, and he came out okay. And I'm expecting him. I know he changed camps a little bit. He's gone away from Jackson's camp, so I'm expecting him to kind of have a fresh outlook on things, and I'm expecting to see a better version of Brown. I'm not saying the camp situation is better, but I think that overall, sometimes that kind of thing is needed to just kind of reamp your game and move forward and do some good things. So I think that Brown's kind of going about things the right way. And stylistically, it just is a bad matchup for Schaub. Schaub's going to need to get the takedowns here. He's going to need to control Brown on the ground and, possibly, I don't think he's going to submit Brown because Brown's jiu-jitsu game's solid as well, but he's going to probably need to just grind out a decision. And I think it's going to be very hard for Schaub to do that. I think Brown is going to be able to maintain it upright, and he's the more dangerous of the two as far as striking goes. So I think Brown eventually catches Schaub. If not, he should be able to kind of outpoint him for 3 rounds and get the decision that way. So my official pick is Travis Brown.
I'm going to have to agree. Obviously, Brendan Schaub's chin is the number one factor going into this prediction. But the one thing that I'm very impressed with Brendan Schaub is he knows that his chin isn't very good. He knows he can't take a good shot anymore. So he's changed the way he fights. He's not just a stand and bang type of guy anymore that's willing to live and die by the sword. Now he's more focused on using his wrestling, using his submissions. You saw that in the Matt Mitrione fight, a fighter that, probably would have knocked him out a couple of years ago, but in this situation, he was able to get him down and work a choke and get a technical submission. Against Travis Brown, though, I think that's going to be more difficult because Schaub's not going to be able to stand and trade because Brown does have tremendous power, and when Schaub goes to shoot in for the takedown, unless he's able to get Travis Brown on his back in one fluid motion, he's going to be in big trouble. We've seen this multiple times now where guys shoot in for a takedown against Travis Brown, they push him against the fence, and he just starts elbowing the side of their head. He did it against Gabriel Gonzaga, put him out cold, and then the exact same thing happened against Josh Barnett. And we underestimated Travis Brown against Josh Barnett in that fight, and I'm not going to do it again. The guy has the perfect defense against a wrestler that isn't super explosive, and Brendan Schaub just is not a super explosive wrestler. And if Schaub tries to get that takedown along the fence, Brown is going to punish him for it. And Schaub has a much worse chin than somebody like Josh Barnett, who went, completely out. So I really feel like this is Travis Brown's fight to lose. In open space, he's going to be the much more dynamic, fluid, powerful, explosive striker. And in the clinch, Travis Brown's elbows are going to be a huge factor. If Brendan Schaub gets him down, he's got a chance. But I don't see him being able to take Travis Brown down repeatedly and consistently, and I don't see him being able to submit Travis Brown. So, you have to side with Travis Brown here. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, you guys have already hit on a lot of the good themes, and I'll throw some stats onto the fire. First of all, they're heavyweights. They hit hard. There will not be a big reach differential, but both guys having knockdown rates that are well above average, even for heavyweights. But on the flip side, you talk about knockdown resiliency, aka the chin. Both men have been dropped 3 times, but on a punch-for-punch basis, Travis Brown is proven to be much, much more durable. In fact, far more durable than the average heavyweight in terms of being able to take a punch. Schaub, it's just taken fewer punches to put him down. Now, we can speculate as to why. He is a football player. I've always been concerned about guys in contact sports crossing over into fighting, and maybe that has affected them long term. But whatever the cause, Brendan Schaub actually has been proactive in changing his style. So the last several times when he's gone in against a power striker, Matt Mitrione, LeVar Johnson, he took the fight to the mat. He grinded one out, but he also showed some impressive submissions against Matt Mitrione. So he is dangerous on the mat. Now the question is, can he get Travis Brown down? Travis Brown is a big, big guy, yet he moves very, very well. He's got great balance, and his takedown defense is 86%, so way above average. So he is hard to put on the mat. If Schaub can get it there, he has proven to be able to control people there. He hasn't been on his own back very much, and I don't expect Travis Brown to be initiating takedowns. He doesn't really initiate a lot of takedowns to begin with. I doubt he's going to be looking for that here. He's looking for the knockout. Schaub is looking to be tight, conservative, keep his distance, maybe use his speed. Schaub does have fast hands. I feel like he's faster in training than he is in the cage on fight night. But that's just, personal opinion. It's a closer matchup on paper, than the line suggests. But I think the line is what it is because these are heavyweights. Travis Brown hits hard and Schaub has suffered a lot of knockouts. And so it probably is where it should be. But I think, a more interesting angle here might be the total because everybody's expecting this fight to end very quickly. And if Schaub is well rested at first, he might, his grinding, his wrestling, his grappling, might actually save him early on. And he might even steal a round or two. So, I don't know if it goes the distance, but I do think this will take a little bit longer than the totals are currently suggesting.
Excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now this takes us to the co-main event of the evening, and it is a lightweight title fight between champion Anthony Pettis, who is 17-2, taking on Gilbert Melendez, who is 22-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Pettis minus 185, the comeback on Melendez plus 145. And a little bit of back and forth action came in early on, but right now there's definitely been some movement towards Pettis. Pettis is now at minus 250. The comeback on Melendez is plus 210. So public betting support out there, sharp opinions, regular common opinions. A lot of people are siding with Anthony Pettis in this spot. And it's hard to argue it. I mean, Pettis has looked really tremendous. I mean, and his ability to improve what his weakness was, I think at one point was definitely being controlled and, out-grinded by some fighters. If you look at his last loss, it was to the hands of Clay Guida, all the way back in 2011, and that's how Guida managed to, get the fight to the floor and grind out Pettis a little bit. That's how he lost it. He's addressed that area for sure. His wrestling offensively and defensively has gotten way better. Of course, training with a guy like Ben Askren doesn't hurt that. It only, improves that status for sure. And as far as what Pettis does best, I mean, we know that he's got a great jiu-jitsu game. I mean, just ask Benson Henderson. That was really a surprise to most of us as well, but he's a striker, and he's a devastating striker at that. I mean, look at what he did to Donald Cerrone. Cerrone's a very dangerous striker, as we all know. He gets a ton of respect out there, and Pettis just ran through him. So that's the kind of special talent that Anthony Pettis is. Now, for me, the main concern is obviously the knee. I mean, he's had surgery. He's been out for such a long time. I'm hearing that everything should be okay, but I mean, there's going to be some ring rust for sure to shake off there. And coming off of a severe injury like that, there's always going to be some question marks. So that does concern me a little bit with Pettis. And on the other hand, though, I mean, Melendez hasn't been really that active himself. I mean, he's been out since 2013 as well. He won a unanimous decision over Diego Sanchez at that time, an impressive decision. But in that third round, he did get clipped, tagged, and rocked by Diego Sanchez. And this could be a little bit, I guess, I could be making something out of nothing, but in my opinion, I mean, if you look at Diego Sanchez lately, I know he performed really well against Ben Henderson, or I'm sorry, if you look at Gilbert Melendez recently, I know he performed well against Ben Henderson, arguably won that fight. A lot of people think the nod could have went to him, but he's been in the game for so long. He's 31 years old now, but in fight years, I think he's beyond that. I mean, he's been in so many great wars. He's fought some decent level competition along the way, and he's always been at the top of the food chain at the lightweight division. But I think there might be a little bit of sign of decline with Melendez at this point. I think that he got tagged in that of course, Diego Sanchez fight, which was a little bit surprising. And against Pettis, he's definitely going to have to improve that aspect, or he's not going to be able to just get in that firefight that he was getting into with Sanchez. I mean, that could be definitely a huge mistake for Melendez. But not just that. I mean, we could eventually see a spot where Melendez, all that time and all those wars kind of catch up to him, and we could see a decline spot any moment. I'm kind of expecting that from Melendez. I hope it doesn't happen because he's a great fighter, he's a warrior, he's well-rounded, and he's a grinder. I mean, this is typically, stylistically, this is the type of fighter that is bad matchup for Pettis in most cases. But I think Pettis has improved his takedown defense enough that we're probably going to see this fight maintain on the feet. And Gilbert Melendez has a decent enough boxing game to make things interesting, of course, on the feet as well. But overall, I think it's Pettis' fight to win or lose. I think he's just a little bit more technical. He's got a smoother stand-up game overall. He could be a lot more damaging, obviously, on the feet as well. And with that, maybe in the back of my mind, seeing some of those spots that Melendez hasn't looked up to par, to me at least, as of recent. I think that Pettis, if he is coming in healthy, and he's okay to fight, he's probably going to end up at least outpointing Melendez. If there is going to be a finish in this fight, I think it's going to be Anthony Pettis finishing Gilbert Melendez. Now, if the fight gets to cards, I think it's going to be a really close decision. It's going to be a competitive decision because Melendez is going to bring it, man. I mean, he's going to look for those takedowns, I'm sure. I don't know if he's going to be that successful again at getting those takedowns, but still, with his hands, with the pace that he pushes, and his fight IQ, Melendez is going to be game for sure. So this is a very interesting fight. This is a very close fight in most cases, but I do think it's Anthony Pettis' fight to win or lose. I think he is, at this point of their careers, a little bit better, a little bit more explosive, a little bit more dynamic, and I think that he's got the skill set to probably beat Gilbert Melendez. So my pick is going to be Anthony Pettis, and I think he's going to retain the UFC strap.
And I'm in complete agreement. Gilbert Melendez is a terrific fighter, but he's not really coming into this fight with a lot of advantages. I mean, you would hope that because Anthony Pettis was out for so long due to the injuries and the long layoff, that Melendez would be able to take advantage of it, but he didn't. He last fought Diego Sanchez, it feels like forever ago, and then they both coached The Ultimate Fighter, so that puts them both on a long timetable. So the ring rust is going to be a factor for both guys. No one gets an advantage there. And in terms of pure MMA skill, you gotta side with Anthony Pettis. This guy is so quick, so explosive, so dynamic, and so dangerous and so creative on the feet that I think he's gonna present a lot of problems for Melendez. Melendez, he's the type of guy that had issues with a fighter like Josh Thompson on the feet because he's able to throw all those push kicks and mix things up and really keep him off balance, while Melendez is a little bit more of a stand-up puncher, boxer on the feet. So I think Melendez is going to be a lot more worried about what Pettis is going to do on the feet than what Pettis is going to be worried about Melendez. And in terms of striking defense, Pettis does a much better job of avoiding strikes. He doesn't tend to get in big, crazy brawls. He doesn't take a lot of damage, while Melendez, he's much more willing to eat shots. And I think that's going to be a big problem because Pettis is so accurate, and even though it doesn't seem like he has a lot of power, because he's so accurate and he can hit you with so many different shots from different angles, he can knock you out because you don't see him coming. Just look at the Donald Cerrone fight, where he just kept coming and was able to just land some really nasty shots and put him away. Now, on the ground, Melendez does have a wrestling edge, so there is a potential for Melendez to get Pettis to the ground, drag him down, beat him up a little bit, but I'm not 100% convinced he's able to do that. Yes, Benson Henderson was able to get him down, but then he got submitted right away. Now, I do not think Anthony Pettis would submit Melendez, but I didn't think Pettis would be able to submit Henderson either. But Pettis probably wants to keep this fight standing for the entire bout. And on the feet, Pettis is able to mix things up with his kicks, with his elbows, with his knees, with his punches. And of course, he can do all kinds of crazy things off the fence. I think he's going to keep Melendez off balance standing. And Melendez's best way to win this fight is to make it ugly. Try to sucker Pettis into a brawl. Try to get this fight in the clinch. Try to drag this fight to the ground. And I'm not quite convinced that he's going to be able to do that. So my pick is going to be Anthony Pettis, and I think he remains UFC lightweight champion. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, they're in agreement here. I think all the advantages really do fall on the side of Anthony Pettis. His striking is very dynamic and extremely powerful for a lightweight, just on a strike-for-strike basis. 5 career knockdowns that we have on record, but they've come at a pretty good clip. Go to the MMA Oddsbreaker website, look at who is the hardest hitter on this card. he is right there underneath, Brendan Schaub, who is a heavyweight. Anthony Pettis as a lightweight has been dropping people at a very good rate. So defensively, he's also very good. He's never been knocked down. He has very tight defense, and he normally controls the cage. Now, Gilbert Melendez, volume has been his friend. He's not really as much of a power striker, especially compared to Anthony Pettis. But Melendez has been willing to engage a lot. And I think eventually Pettis is probably going to do more damage, on the feet. Now, on the ground, we saw Pettis pull off that amazing submission of Benson Henderson. I never would have thought that I was going to see that. But he is very skilled elsewhere. He is not just a flashy striker that we thought he might be. So although we haven't seen a lot of it, his ground game has come a long way. You know, he did get, I think, just purely wrestled in his UFC debut by Clay Guida. We're not going to see that again, I don't think. Pettis he is just a gifted fighter, very good finishing instinct, talented all around. I don't know if he'll get the finish here against Melendez. I do think he will land the more damaging strikes, and that could set up a finish, but I gotta side with Pettis here.
Thanks, Reed. Now this takes us to the main event of the evening, a welterweight title fight between champion Johnny Hendricks, who is 16-2, taking on Robbie Lawler, who is 24-10 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Hendricks minus 270, the comeback on Lawler plus 210. And right now it's Hendricks actually minus 220, the comeback on Lawler's plus 180. I know it seems like a little bit more support coming in on Lawler, and at first that was probably the case, but action has balanced the books out a little bit more, and they're pretty steady on this fight. I mean, both guys are going to get supported here. Last time, if you look at the line, it was ridiculous. I mean, Hendricks was a steeper favorite for sure, overall, and it stayed that way for the most part. So, the sportsbooks are actually going to probably need Robbie Lawler to come through here. And you know what? That's not a bad spot to be in most cases. I think that, I mean, if you look at it, a guy with a devastating knockout power that Robbie Lawler has, and his ability to just control the tempo of the fight and do damage along the way, especially at welterweight since he's come back down to 170. I mean, the guy's wrestling is up to par in most cases. He's hard to take down, hard to control, and he can knock you out. I mean, plain and simple. I mean, he's one of the most dangerous power punchers in all of the UFC. But you could say a lot of the same things about Hendricks as well. But Hendricks does obviously have the wrestling advantage. He can get some takedowns along the way. So that's kind of going to be the game plan. I mean, we're going to probably see a very similar fight to the first fight between these guys here. So it's hard to lay that kind of juice against Lawler. I mean, if the fight hits the scorecards, it's going to be close. Make no mistake about it. I think Lawler can win. Again, he could probably win 2 rounds. Out of the 5. So maybe even, you know, with the state of MMA judging out there, maybe even get the fight on the scorecards and, actually win 3 out of the 5. So it's going to be a sweat. If you guys are laying that kind of juice on, Hendricks, I would be very cautious. And on the other hand, I mean, if you really look at it, both these guys have such tremendous amount of knockout power that all it takes is one punch from these guys as well, and the other guy could be put to sleep. Now, both these guys have chins. I mean, if you look at it, Hendricks was in trouble big time, a few spots in that first fight, but he survived. I mean, that was just his toughness. That's the heart of a champion, if you will, and Hendricks definitely has that. Now, at the same time, I mean, we all know that after the fight, it came out that Hendricks was actually hurt going into that fight, and he was kind of fighting with one arm, if that makes any sense, and he performed awesome. I mean, he deserved to get that nod. I was all over Lawler at the big plus money last time. I thought there was a tremendous amount of value in that spot, but I can't argue with Hendricks winning that fight. I know it was close, but I do believe that Hendricks pulled it out. So that's even more impressive considering he basically, you know, had one arm that was severely damaged going into that fight. So hats off to Hendricks for that. Now, in this case, I think that it would probably come into play a little bit, and we might see the line kind of creep back up in Hendricks' favor, because I do think that we're going to see probably a better and fresher, obviously, with the time off, as far as Hendricks goes, a fresher fighter. But at the same time, I mean, it could work against him, and we could see the layoff have a little bit of ring rust, affect Hendricks as well. So it's interesting in that aspect of it. Will the time hurt him or will the time help him? I'm really not sure. I think the rest probably will benefit him more than anything else. I know he's been working hard, so he should be up to par and he should look good, in his fight with Lawler. But at the same time, again, going back to what I originally said, I mean, these guys are both heavy hitters. The advantages in the wrestling aspect definitely go to Hendricks, but overall, I think the skill on the feet, you gotta favor Lawler. He was getting tagged in that fight, Hendricks mixed things up extremely well, landed some good knees throughout that fight as well. So Lawler has to be cautious, but if it does stay standing, you gotta kind of give the slight edge to Lawler on the feet. But overall MMA game, you gotta give it to Hendricks. So I'm gonna pick Hendricks here to win this fight. I think that more times than not, he is just barely above Lawler in this spot because he is the more complete MMA fighter. So as far as decision goes, and if it does hit the cards, I gotta favor Hendricks a little bit again. But as far as damage and explosiveness goes, I mean, it's hard to bet against Robbie Lawler. So I think it is a dog or pass situation as far as betting. But as far as my pure pick goes, I am going to lean towards Hendricks. I mean, he's a champ, and I think he deserves to be right now.
The one thing that does scare me about Hendricks is the time off. Obviously, he did fight the last fight against Robbie Lawler a bit injured, and he really wasn't able to use his wrestling until the 5th round when Lawler started to slow down. But in the meantime, since that fight, Hendricks has not done anything, and Lawler's gone out and beaten 2 really tough guys in Jake Ellenberger and Matt Brown. And, he won convincingly in both those fights. Hendricks, on the other hand, he's just been resting and recovering, and, they were saying that he might not be back until 2015, but he's back a little bit early. So, is he rushing himself back? That's a concern. But the other thing you gotta factor in with this is, is Hendricks healthy this time? And if he is he healthier than he was the first time he fought Lawler when he still was able to walk away with a close decision victory? Now again, that fight did come down to the 5th round and Hendricks was able to pull it out, but there's a lot of things to take into consideration here. In terms of pure power, both these guys hit incredibly hard, both have good chins, both are dynamic strikers. Hendricks is a little bit more reliant on the pure punching, while Lawler can mix things up a little bit with the knees and kicks. But the thing that I really liked about Lawler in his last fight was he put a lot of pressure on Hendricks. He stayed right in the pocket and was willing to just trade bombs. Hendricks is probably going to be ready for that. I would not be surprised one bit to see Hendricks start to utilize a little bit more of his wrestling in this fight, especially if he doesn't have any of those injuries he talked about. And that could definitely be one of the biggest factors in this bout, is if Hendricks has that explosion back, because his grappling instincts are terrific. If he gets in top position, he's not the most devastating ground and pound guy, but he can hold you down, he can stay active, and he can win rounds. And that could definitely happen against Lawler. And what could also happen is these guys just stand and bang for 5 more rounds. This is a really crazy fight. And honestly, I'm leaning Johnny Hendricks just because an injured Johnny Hendricks was still able to walk away with a close decision, although, the odds were definitely not in the right side that time. He was too big of a favorite. This time the odds are much closer, and Hendricks, in my opinion, is still just as good and has not taken some of the wear and tear that Lawler has taken during this time against, fighters like Matt Brown, who really clipped him a couple times. So I'm thinking Hendricks is going to be a little bit healthier and a little less wear and tear, and I'm going to side with Hendricks, although I'm not 100% convinced, because, you got to see him in the cage. So I'm going to pick him, but I'm not crazy confident. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I think overall, you guys are right. I mean, Hendricks should be a favorite here. He walked away with a decision with an injury in their last fight not that long ago. So if he's healthy going into the cage, why wouldn't he be the better fighter? Yet on paper, there's a lot of advantages over in Robbie Lawler's column. He is going to be the bigger guy. They're both southpaws, and Lawler's striking has just been a little bit more crisp. He avoids strikes better, and he's been ever so slightly more accurate. Although I think some of that has to do with the range differential. Hendricks has always been outgunned in terms of range. And both guys are powerful. They're more powerful than their peers. But Lawler actually gets a slight edge there. So, on their feet, this is a very close contest. And that's what we saw in their first fight. We saw rounds going one way or the other. We probably saw Lawler being the more dangerous one of the two. Now Lawler does not attempt a lot of takedowns. And that's an understatement. I mean, in his last few fights in the UFC, his most recent run, I mean, there has only been a couple takedown attempts, and even if you can call them that, I think he's already hurt someone and then gone for it. But he is just going to stand and bang. That is very likely Lawler's game plan here, hoping that he has the better hands. Johnny Hendricks, when he mixes in the wrestling, is much more effective at winning the round. When you're at a range disadvantage, you are definitely working uphill when you're just standing and trading. And that's a dangerous place for Hendricks to be, because he did lose some rounds there in their first fight. So if it stays standing, I expect it to be very close, and therefore I would say that there's some value on the underdog. But if we see a smarter Hendricks come out and mix in the wrestling with his good hands, then we should see a Frankie Edgar type performance where he boxes a bit, but he throws in some takedowns for the exclamation point, and that's how he's going to win rounds. Both guys are extremely durable. Hendricks has now taken a lot of headshots, and he has yet to be knocked down. In fact, when I met him in Las Vegas, I actually showed him the stats on how many times he's been hit in the head, and he was a little depressed by that. But I pointed out, hey, you haven't been knocked down, so that's saying something. So he is very durable, even though he got dinged up in that first fight. So it's a close call. I would not be surprised with an upset, but there's enough edges that if we see the right Johnny Hendricks in the cage, he should win.
So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC 181. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out Friday afternoon or early evening after the weigh-ins. So stay tuned for that if you're an MMAOddsBreaker.com premium member. And don't forget, MMAOddsBreaker.com has a special Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all-week sale for MMA Oddsbreaker Premium. It is 100% free for our single event package for UFC 181. All you have to do is go to MMAOddsBreaker.com, and it'll be a special section that you can't miss in the top right corner. Just click there, sign up, and no strings attached. Now, if we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter, because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsBreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Also, feel free to like the Premium Oddscast Facebook page. We post articles, show announcements, and plenty of other information there so you can stay up to date on everything from us if you're interested. Special thanks to our sponsor, 5 Dimes. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.